Wow, thank you so much. I am so honored to be here with you this morning. I'd especially like to thank Elder Clark Gilbert and Vice President Justin Collings for inviting me to be here. It's not every day that a Jewish studies professor from Tulane University ends up in front of 5,000 students at BYU. It's also not every day that I get to trade in my New Orleans swamps for your beautiful snow-capped mountains. Wow. They are beautiful. It is even more exceptional that I get to speak on a campus with a basketball team that is still dancing in the NCAA tournament. There we go. And while I missed my beignet this morning, I am looking forward to eating some of those famous tater tots for lunch. But while the culinary tastes of our cities might be a bit different, one thing that we certainly share is a belief in the power of education. And that is what I want to talk with you about today. 2/3 of Americans don't graduate college. Some of them never start, while some of them start but never finish. As a sociologist, my job is to understand why. And for over a decade, I have studied what helps and what hinders students on their path to graduation. Today, I want to share something surprising that my research has uncovered. Your religious commitments may have already helped you get here by providing the discipline, the structure, and access to social networks that boosted your grades in high school. And as it turns out, those very same commitments might be exactly what you need to cross that finish line to graduation. As I look out at this incredible and very large audience, I see more than individuals just pursuing a degree. I see the stories behind your journey. Many of you are the first in your families to attend college, guided by values of hard work, faith, and perseverance. These values are not just abstract ideas. They are foundational principles shaping your lives. I know that your faith isn't something that you practice only on Sundays. It influences your daily decisions, your work ethic, and your vision for the future. So today, I'm going to share some research with you about how young people who grow up with deep religious commitments, whom I call abiders in my academic work, are more likely to succeed in school and to graduate from college. This effect is especially pronounced for young people from working class backgrounds, where religion can provide a crucial source of stability, support, and motivation. I will also show you why religion and education are not in competition, but deeply complementary, reinforcing the same values that help so many young people succeed in school. Before diving into the research, let me share a bit of my own story, one that illustrates in many ways the profound impact of religious community. I was born in 1981 in the former Soviet Union, what is now Russia. In Russia, being Jewish wasn't just a religion. It was a nationality, and it was marked as such on our passports. And yet, despite this official label, my family knew very little about Judaism. We lived under a communist regime that strictly prohibited religious expression. Under communism, the government controls nearly every aspect of life: where you work, what you can say, and even what you are allowed to believe. Religion was seen as a threat to state power because it encouraged loyalty to something higher than the government. As a result, places of worship were shut down, religious leaders are persecuted, and most forms of religious education were outlawed. I spent my early years of life knowing nothing about religion, anyone else's or my own. I had never been inside a synagogue, never celebrated a Jewish holiday, and never read anything from a Bible. My parents once tried to send my older sister to a secret Jewish Sunday school, but the teacher was arrested, and we never found out what happened to her. That was the reality of life under Soviet rule. Like many Russian Jews, my parents became refuseniks, Jews who applied to emigrate but were denied by the government. You see, being a refusenik had profound consequences. The Russian government viewed emigration requests as an act of betrayal, branding refuseniks as disloyal citizens and potential enemies of the state. As a result, refuseniks and their families often faced significant personal, professional, and social repercussions. But my parents dreamed of raising their children in a place where they could openly practice Judaism. They had heard that America was a land of opportunity, a country where everyone was guaranteed the freedom to practice their religion, protected by the First Amendment, a freedom they had never experienced under Soviet rule. Finally, in 1988, when I was 7 years old, my family received permission to leave. Our journey took nearly 2 months. We passed through Austria and Italy before we were finally able to reach the US. When we arrived in Philadelphia, we had 4 suitcases, a few $100s, and no English. My parents had to start their lives completely from scratch. In Russia, they were highly educated engineers, but in America, they took low-paying jobs just to survive. My mother cleaned houses while my father worked as an entry-level engineer. And in the evenings, I accompanied them to their jobs cleaning office buildings, where I would dust some offices, take out the trash, before falling asleep on the lobby couch. Starting over in America was incredibly difficult, but it gave us something priceless: the freedom to connect with our Judaism for the very first time. With the support of Jewish organizations like the Jewish Federation and HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, we were connected to resources to rebuild our lives. One of the biggest turning points for me was the opportunity to attend a Jewish school. With the help of generous scholarships, I was able to receive an education where I not only learned to read and learn math, but it also introduced me to Jewish traditions, prayers, Jewish history, and of course, Jewish children and their families, things that had been completely absent from my life in Russia. For the first time, we learned what it meant to be part of a religious community. 2 moments from my childhood stand out in particular. The first moment was during my first Passover Seder when I was 9 years old, an experience that showed me what it means to welcome the stranger. Passover is one of the most important Jewish holidays. It commemorates the Israelites' exodus from slavery in Egypt, a story central to Jews all over the world. Families gather for a special meal, retell the Exodus story, eat symbolic foods, sing joyful songs, and follow traditions that have been passed down from generation to generation. One of these traditions is that Jews are commanded to invite a stranger into their home, remembering that Jews too were once strangers in Egypt. At this particular Seder, my family were definitely the strangers. We had never met our hosts before. They had simply volunteered to welcome Russian Jewish immigrants like ourselves to Passover. everything felt foreign to us. Our social class, our language, our religious knowledge, all of that set us apart. And I remember that walking into this family's beautiful home felt like stepping into a completely different world. And yet this family welcomed us warmly, treating us as if we truly belonged. During the middle of the Seder, the host hid a piece of matzah. Matzah is an unleavened bread, which symbolizes the Israelites' hurried escape from Egypt when they didn't have enough time for their dough to rise. Adults hide this piece of matzah during the Seder, and the children have to go find it. Seders are quite long, lasting far into the evening, so this gives children a very good opportunity to leave the table and run around. Whomever finds the matzah traditionally receives a small prize, maybe stickers or $1. And so when the host asked me and the other kids to search for the matzah, I hesitated. Was I really supposed to rummage through this strange home, go through their living room, lift up the couch cushions, peek behind the furniture and their books? It seemed really strange. But then again, so much about America seemed strange to me at that time. So I decided to play along, and when I was the one who found the matzah, I didn't get a small prize. Instead, the host family told me that they would take me to a toy store over the weekend so that I could pick out anything that I wanted. Going to a toy store for me was a big deal because at that point, almost everything that I owned was secondhand. So the idea of walking into a store filled with shiny, untouched toys where I could choose something brand new felt unreal. And so that weekend, I remember standing in that aisle of that toy store, overwhelmed by the possibilities. And then I saw it, a beautiful doll, unlike anything I had ever owned. And that was the one I chose. That Passover, I learned what it meant to be welcomed, not just into a home, but into a community. Which brings me to my second story. A few years after that Seder, soon after we became American citizens, my family faced our darkest moment. I was 14, sitting at home, writing an essay for my English class while chatting on the phone with a friend. And suddenly I heard the beep of the call waiting. I switched over, and in an instant, my life changed forever. A driver had a seizure, lost control, and killed my dad. I was 14 years old and suddenly without a father. Losing a parent is always devastating, but for a financially struggling immigrant family, it could have been completely destabilizing. In an instant, my mother, sister, and I faced overwhelming loss and deep uncertainty about our future. But our Jewish community stepped in immediately. The very next morning, food began arriving at our doorstep. Home-cooked meals, bagels, casseroles, sent by people we barely knew. Our rabbi canceled all of his meetings and drove an hour to be with us, to sit by my mother's side. At my father's funeral, busloads of classmates, teachers, parents poured in. My school had even canceled classes so that anybody who wanted to attend could be there. In the days that followed, our home was never empty. Every morning at 6 a.m., students took hour-long shuttle rides to our house to help us hold a prayer service. You see, in Jewish tradition, you cannot hold these services alone. You need a minyan, a quorum of 10 people over the age of 13. This communal support wasn't random. It was part of a Jewish mourning ritual called Shiva. During Shiva, family members do not leave their home for 7 days. Instead, the community comes to them. The focus isn't on work or daily responsibilities. It's about grief, memory, healing. It is about being surrounded by people who share your sorrow. For an entire week, friends and community members sat with us, listened to us, and made sure that we never felt alone. This experience taught me something profound. Religious communities are not just about faith. They provide a safety net, a deep sense of belonging, and a structure that supports people in life's hardest moments. Unbeknownst to me at the time, these experiences became foundational touchstones for my academic career. Years later, while pursuing a PhD at Stanford University, I found myself drawn to questions about how religion might influence other aspects of life, particularly education. I had moved to Escondido Village, a housing complex for students at Stanford who had families. And as I spent time on the playgrounds with my daughter, I noticed something striking. Many of my neighbors, mostly Christian families, including several who were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, structured their lives around their faith. Every Sunday morning, they piled into their cars and headed to church. I also saw them gathering for family home evening. Their homes were decorated with religious symbols, scripture verses in frames, Christian-themed children's books on coffee tables, and pictures of Jesus. It was clear that for these families, religion was not something that just happened on Sunday. They lived it, and they breathed it. Then one day, I came across a chart from the Pew Research Center that stopped me in my tracks. It showed that the United States is the only wealthy nation where a significant percentage of people pray every day. At the time, I was thinking a lot about how race and social class and gender shape educational outcomes. But as I spoke with my neighbors, I kept wondering, did their religious upbringing play a role in their academic trajectories? If religion was such a dominant force in American life, might it shape how young people behave in school? I assumed that there must be already a wealth of research on this topic. But when I dug into the literature, I was stunned to find almost nothing. No books, just a handful of academic articles. And so I set out to fill that gap. And after 6 years, I published my findings in a book titled God, Grades, and Graduation: Religion's Surprising Impact on Academic Success. For my research, I studied over 3,000 teenagers for over a decade as they moved from high school into early adulthood. I drew extensively from surveys as well as interviews with over 200 people who were followed during this 10-year period. These interviews helped me see how these teens' religious, social, academic, and family lives unfolded over time. I paid particularly close attention to those abiders, teens whose religious belief and behavior were deeply intertwined. These included conservative Protestants, Catholics, Black Protestant, mainline Protestants, and Latter-day Saints. To isolate the effect of being religious, I controlled for things like family income, race, parental education, and school type. I also compared students from across different social class groups to see if religion mattered differently for low-income teens versus more affluent teens. By combining surveys and college records and interviews, I could see how religious upbringing shaped not just what students aspired for, what they achieved, and also how they got there. Americans don't agree on much these days, but nearly everyone does agree that education matters. It leads to better jobs, higher earnings, better health, and even longer lives. If education is so important, why don't more people earn a degree? It turns out that not everyone has an equal shot at these benefits. Social class plays a huge role in shaping who makes it to college and who doesn't. If you come from a family where neither parent graduated college, your chances of earning a degree drop dramatically. If you think of the road to college as a metaphorical road, that road is smooth and well paved for kids from wealthy, educated families. But for those growing up in families where parents don't have college degrees and earn less money, that path is full of barriers, detours, and exit ramps that make it much harder to reach the finish line. And it's not just about money. Affluent parents talk to their kids more. They live in better funded school districts. They enroll them in extracurricular activities, and they have more time and energy to guide them through school. Lower income families, on the other hand, are more likely to deal with job instability, financial stress, and school systems that do not have those same resources. Affluent families also have access to something that sociologists call social capital. Social capital refers to the relationships and networks that help people get ahead in life. For children, this might mean frequent dinners with family, access to positive role models, or strong community ties that promote cognitive and social development. Kids who grow up in economically advantaged families have an abundance of social capital. They are surrounded by educated adults, experience stability at home, and benefit from school systems designed to support their success. But lower income families, especially in the past few decades, have seen their social capital decline. As factories have closed and stable jobs have disappeared, many working class kids grow up with fewer adult role models, less structure, and more exposure to instability and despair. For lower income boys in particular, this can be devastating. The decline of stable institutions has contributed to an epidemic of deaths of despair, suicides, drug overdoses, alcohol-related deaths that disproportionately affect working class men. But despair doesn't die. It gets transmitted intergenerationally from fathers to sons. Many boys enter adolescence already marked by hopelessness, sadness, and risky behavior. By their mid-20s, low-income boys are often on track to repeat that same cycle of despair. But there is one major exception: boys who are deeply religious. And that brings me to John. As a 16-year-old, John lived with his parents, his brother, and their 4 dogs near Jackson, Mississippi. John attended a public school where he played football and he was in the band, probably did a lot of things like you guys did in high school. On weekends, he went fishing and hunting with his grandparents. And to earn some money, he mowed people's lawns. His parents didn't have college degrees. They had vocational certificates, and together they earned about $50,000 in today's dollars. His father owned an auto repair shop while his mom worked as a bookkeeper and a substitute teacher. Based on their income, their education, and their occupation, John's family fell squarely into America's working class. That group of Americans who have been having an especially hard time making it to college and are now faring economically worse than their parents' generation. In John's community in Mississippi, substance abuse was rampant, and he had already seen several people die, even though he was just a teenager. And yet John did make it to college. His trajectory stood out, especially compared to many of his working class peers who struggled in school, failed classes, or dropped out entirely. So, what was different about John? It clearly wasn't wealth, and John wasn't more intelligent than his peers. Instead, John benefited from something else, something I call religious restraint. What do I mean by religious restraint? It is a child-rearing style that emphasizes discipline and structure, often reinforced by faith-based communities. For many of the abiders that I studied, their home environments were highly structured. Family meals were prioritized. Church attendance was central to family life. Discipline was a core part of parenting, not as a top-down imposed punishment, but as an expectation of self-control and respect. Parents actively monitored their children's social circles, ensuring that they surrounded themselves with peers who shared their values. There was a strong emphasis on obedience to authority, respecting teachers, elders, and religious leaders. Risky behaviors were avoided, not just because of parental rules, but because students internalized the belief that they were accountable to a higher power. John never drank or used drugs. He didn't even want to attend parties where alcohol or smoking were present. His self-discipline extended beyond this. He avoided violent movies. He didn't want to listen to any music that had curse words, and he obeyed his parents without complaint. John's mantra in life: respect your elders, do good things, and always treat others the way you want to be treated. Religious restraint shaped not just his personal choices, but also his behavior in school. Striving to please God, he was conscientious and cooperative. The very traits that schools reward that contributed to his long-term academic achievement. This mindset helped him persist. After graduating high school in 2006, he enrolled in community college, taking breaks but pushing forward. It took him almost 10 years, but by 2015, John earned an associate's degree and went on to become an EMT with a goal of eventually completing his bachelor's. But John's success wasn't just about grit, and it wasn't just about pulling himself up by the bootstraps. It was about those guardrails that kept him on track when others fell behind. And those guardrails came from his religious community. It offered him the kind of social capital that affluent teens regularly have access to outside of religious communities. Raised in the church, John attended services weekly, sometimes twice a week. He was deeply involved in his church youth group, and its teachings shaped his worldview. Unlike most teenagers who look up to celebrities or family members, John wanted to emulate Jesus. "I want to be more like Christ and live a full, faithful life," he said. "I want to be righteous as God and act in ways that are pleasing to him," he said. Faith didn't just give John moral guidance, it kept him on the path to academic success. Peer pressure, as he said in his interviews, caused him the greatest stress, but his discipline kept him from falling into risky behaviors. John credits his youth group for keeping him on track. Weekly gatherings at the minister's house gave him the space to reflect on difficult things that teenagers deal with: school, struggles, faith. As John said, "It helps me when I'm down. Without religion, I wouldn't be the person that I am now." John's story was not an anomaly in my research. His experience illustrates a pattern I saw repeatedly among working class religious youth. The structure, discipline, and social support provided by religious communities created guardrails that kept them academically focused when many of their less religious peers veered off course. Their religious involvement also gave them access to social capital, that network of adults and peers who offered mentorship, accountability, and encouragement. Across the country, abiders like John consistently perform better in school than their less religious peers. I refer to this in my research as the abider advantage. And it stems from a surprising synergy between church and public education. While we often think of these two institutions as separate or even at odds, they actually reinforce the same values. Why? Because both schools and churches function as systems of socialization, teaching young people discipline, respect for authority, and structured routines. Abiders raised in environments that emphasize these traits naturally align with the expectations of school. When they show up to kindergarten, they already know how to follow the rules, how to regulate their behaviors, and how to cooperate with others. Imagine you are a teacher of 30 rambunctious kids. You love those kids who are willing to sit still, follow directions, and act kindly towards others because it makes it easier for you to do your job. Being conscientious and cooperative may not make someone a straight A student, but it can push that failing student into passing or that average student towards college. This alignment is not coincidental. It is embedded in American history. Public education in the United States was shaped by Protestant ideals, with early schools designed to instill discipline, civic responsibility, and self-restraint, values that remain central to schooling today. And those schools have become more secular. Their core function remains the same, maintaining social order and preparing young people for disciplined participation in our society. For abiders, this alignment creates an academic advantage. Their religious upbringing has already instilled those habits of obedience and self-regulation and kindness, those very qualities that schools reward. As a result, even abiders from less affluent backgrounds often outperform their less religious peers. Their faith does more than provide moral guidance. It equips them with that framework for success in an educational system that values structure and discipline, and a community that reinforces that very message. There is one more trend I want to share with you. The benefits of religious restraint and the guardrails it provides are not distributed evenly because not everyone's road to college looks the same. Affluent students don't benefit from religious guardrails as much because they already have access to social capital through other social institutions. Their road to college is already smooth, and the rails are already installed. But for lower income kids whose road to college is bumpy and filled with potholes and off-ramps, they are the ones who benefit the most from religious restraint to stay on track. What I've shared with you today isn't just about numbers, theories, or abstract sociological concepts. It is about real lives. For many of you, these experiences may feel deeply familiar. The discipline instilled in you, the support of your faith community, and the values that shape your daily decisions, these are the very factors that my research shows contribute to academic success. This means that your story is part of something bigger. The values you've grown up with, kindness, service, self-discipline, aren't just abstract virtues. They are forces that shape real educational outcomes. As you move forward, I encourage you to reflect on how your religious upbringing has shaped you, not just spiritually, but socially and academically. Recognize the power of the community that surrounds you. And so I ask you to think about how you can extend that support to others who need it, to be that welcoming Seder host, the friend who shows up in a time of crisis, or the mentor who helps someone stay on track through school. Your story, your faith, and your community is part of something larger. The journey that began when my family sought religious freedom in America has come full circle through this research. The very communities that welcomed us as strangers and supported us through grief are also the same communities creating academic pathways for countless young people who might otherwise be left behind. In both my personal story and in my data, the message is clear. Religious communities don't just nurture faith. They also build bridges to opportunity. Thank you.